Hey guys, it's Cain here. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm gonna show you three important form components. These are the radio button, the checkbox, and the combo box. We'll use all three components in one form application alongside with the error provider to do their validation. So without losing any further time, let's get started. First thing I'm gonna do is to expand my toolbox and find a group box here, drag and drop it. I like GroupBox because it is a way to organize all form components in the same style. So it's a nice idea to expand it to the entire form and use it to set a font for the entire form. I usually use Verdana because obviously every single computer has this font. And you can select a color if you want to, use the labels with a specific color. It is also a nice idea to change the text of the group box or completely remove it, up to you. So I'm just gonna name mine as profile. Next, I'm gonna drag and drop a label. The label will be used to provide information to the user regarding what we want them to do. So with this label, I'm gonna type select your sex by birth. I am going to use the radio button to offer two options to the user where they will be able to select their sex by birth, which would be either male or female. So expand the toolbox, go down and find the radio button. Should be somewhere here. Yeah. So drag and drop it to the form. First thing you should do is to change the name of the button. So never leave it as radio button 1. Just make sure that it will have a name that you can use at the background of the form. So I'm just gonna name this as radio button male and go up and change the entire text inside to male. I will also copy paste this, and instead of male I'm gonna say female. I will also change the name, which is radio button 1 now, for the second button to radio button female. So I have a male radio button male, and a female one, radio button female, and the user will use them to select their sex by birth. So having done this, it is a nice idea to drag and drop a button which we will use for user interaction. I will actually use two buttons, one for clearing the form and the other for submitting it. So I'll drag and drop this, copy and paste it next to the first one. And this one I just want to name it as button clear, and the other one I want to name it as button submit. Relevant text should go inside of these two buttons. So first one is submit, second one is clear. Having done so, now that the form is ready, we're gonna write the necessary code for this to work out. So just before doing that, I'm gonna go and start debugging the application to see the outcome. You'll see that one of the options is offered to me by default. So it's male and female. So I'm gonna come in here and find the check property for this specific radio button. It should be check false. Make sure to select it, and this one as well. Check false. So male one is selected regardless, so we can say that the check property is true. And at the background of the code, if the check property is true, we're gonna set it to false. So this one is checked now by default. So I'll go double click to this part of the form and write something like, if this radio button male dot checked is false. We can do the same thing for the female. As you can see, female is now selected, so it is probably a good idea to do them both. Can also put an if statement just to see their state, whether they are checked or not. Oops. So I'm gonna go into design and start debugging. At the background of the code, make sure to type if this radio button male is checked, which is obviously you are checking the state of the button, false. And we're gonna do the same thing for the female. Inside the form, I'm gonna set this up checked true, and this one also the same. So let me go up and do it. So if this radio button checked is false, and if this radio button, this should be female, right? Female. Radio button female should be checked as well. And now, as you can see, it works. None of them are selected. It's a weird way of solving this problem, to be honest. I personally don't like how a Visual C# handles this, but yeah, well, if you write that code, it will obviously work. Just make sure that their check state is there, checked manually, so that you can remove it at the background of the code. Now that we have done this part, we're gonna go into the submit and display the sex by birth of the user when they select it. And you can actually use exactly the same logic here. So you can come in here and put it in there. If this radio button dot checked, which means the user has clicked on it, you can basically create a message box dot show and say something like, you define your sex by birth as male. And we'll do the same thing for the female, but this time I'm just gonna type it else if rather than just if. This is because you either select the male or the female. They shouldn't be selected at the same time when you define your sex by birth. So make sure to put the else if rather than just an if statement in here. So you can do the same logic in here actually, so it's at the end of the day, it's up to you. So I'm gonna start this application, and as you can see, I'm gonna select one of the choices, submit, and you define your sex by birth as male. And I'm gonna select the other one, submit, you define your sex by birth as female. The submit button needs to be expanded a little bit because the T is not visible. So let me just go there and expand it slightly. There you go. And it should be okay now. Yeah. So it looks fine now. So male, female. The only thing left is the clear button. So I'm just gonna double click on this. And because I'm gonna repeat the same code here, let me just go ahead and create a clear functionality rather than copy and pasting the same code. I'm just gonna create a function called clear all fields, which makes more sense to me since I try to avoid code repetition. It is actually not a nice thing to repeat the same code over and over again in a programming environment. So if you can create a reusable method to do that, that will be much more effective solution. So I want to clear all fields when the form is loaded, and I also want to do that the same thing when the button clear is clicked. So I'm gonna go into and start debugging the application. I'm gonna select male, submit, female, submit, and clear, which obviously clears the choice. Now that we have done the radio button, I'm gonna go into the checkbox and ComboBox. So let's go to the checkbox first. I'm just gonna change the color for this one to make it more stand out. And underneath this section, I'm gonna select your interest, something like that. Select your interest, and going into the toolbox, I will find this time the checkbox. Checkbox works in a very similar fashion with the radio button, but instead of offering multiple choices and selecting only one of them, you can now offer multiple choices and select multiple, or select none. It all depends on what the user wants to do. So there's these options offered to them, but it's up to them to select them or not. So most of the time this is offered to user as an optional thing, like selecting their interest, or they could select multiple options among multiple options basically. So I'm gonna copy and paste a couple of them. I think 3 is enough, and write down some interest in here. First I'm gonna say music, second will be let's say fashion, and the third one will be football. So I will offer 3 different options. One is a little bit male oriented, the other one is a little female oriented, and the third one is like both. So I will just list them in here and change their name. Checkbox music, checkbox fashion, and checkbox football. So making sure that they have their names now, I will go into the background of the code and use a similar fashion for clearing out these components. Excuse me. So I will go down and look into the code, and I will use the same logic in here to clear every single one of them. So I'm going to select something like this, checkbox fashion.checked, and I will set its states to unchecked. So checkbox fashion.checked is going to be false. So if the box is already selected, it will set it to false. And we'll use the same logic with the if statement now. Instead of else if, I will use if, because it's not one choice or the other anymore. It's like they could select all of them or maybe none of them. So checkbox football.checked equals to false. Oops, I'll go up here. Checked equals to false, and finally the same thing for music. Checked state, if it is already checked, we will set it to false. So this one is done for music, that one is done for football, and the top one is done for fashion. So we will go into here, start the application, and I will select music, football and fashion all together and press on the clear button, and as you can see, they are cleared on the form. So now that this is selected, we can basically create a string here for interest, and I will set it up to empty for now, and each time one of these options is selected, we will obviously add them on the top of the interest. So we're gonna follow the same logic here. If this checkbox fashion is selected, let me just separate it from the radio button. So I'm just gonna say checkboxes. I will set up the interest plus equals to fashion. So that will be plus equals to. You can leave some space in between. It's up to you how you want to handle this. You can put a comma, you can leave a space. At the end of the day, it's up to you how you want to display your output. So I'm just going to use space because it's probably the easiest way to do it. And because I have multiple lines here, I will also put the brackets. But if you're going to put only one line after if, you don't need to. But if it has multiple, then that's no longer an option, so I have to put the brackets. I will use the same logic, exactly the same thing for football and music. So I will come in here and say checkbox. This time it's gonna be football. Instead of saying fashion, I'm gonna say football. And the final one, music. So I will go down, and this one should be music. And I will change this one to music as well. Once this is done, you can basically display the message box. It's up to you. So you can come into here and say something like, if interest dot should be interest dot length is less than 0, and that is not true, which means there is something inside of it, then we're gonna display the message box. Message box dot show and the interest. It's important that, however, when you click on the clear button, you set up the interest to empty each time it is clicked. That should be empty. So that whenever they click, the user clicks on the clear all fields, the interest will be set to empty, and when it is not empty, then the interest will be displayed. So let's see if this logic is going to work for us. So I'm going to build the application. I will select male and football and music for my interest. I'll actually select fashion as well and submit. I define my sex by birth as male, and in the next screen I will see my interests are fashion, football and music. I will remove fashion and football from the list and resubmit, and then I will see fashion on the top of football, music and music again. So this creates some problem for me because it just kept the previous value. When I click clear, however, it will not run into the same problem because I cleared the fashion, I cleared the interest. So it only displays this when I submit again and again. So we have to go ahead and clear the interest each time it is submitted. So come in here and make sure that interest is empty. Each time there's a new submission, this has to be empty. So once again, male, fashion football, I define as male, fashion football is displayed. Now I'm gonna remove football and add music and fashion, and it will solve my problem now. It immediately displays what I want to see in here. So it works absolutely fine now. If I select all three, it will display all three. If I select only one, it will display that one, or two, it will display those two, and so forth. So far we have done the radio buttons, and we have also finished the checkboxes. The next thing we're gonna do is the combo box. So I'm gonna close this and go into the form, slightly expand it, just to have more space for the combo box. And I'm gonna take this down and take this down as well, and copy and paste the label part, and instead of interest I'm gonna say in here nationality. Drag and drop the combo box now, which is the next form component, and this one is for displaying multiple selections, and you only select one among the choices, just like the radio button. However, radio button is usually used when you have only 2 or 3 options, whereas combo box is used when you have a list of options and you will only select one of them. So that is the difference between the two. By using combo box, you also have a short space for those multiple options instead of listing them side by side or one after the other. So I'm gonna go down. The first thing I'm gonna change is the drop down style of the combo box, and I will make sure that it is a drop down list. This is because if you don't put this, you can actually type inside the combo box. So if you run the application without changing the drop down style, you can go inside and type stuff. This is not something I like to have. I don't want the user to type inside. I want them to select what I offer to them. So I will go in here and make sure that the style for it is a drop down list. So we're gonna come in here and select drop down list. The next thing I'm gonna do is to go down all the way and change its name. So instead of combo box 1, I'm gonna say combo box nationality. Finally, I'm gonna add some items inside, and if you go into the items part, you will see there is the collection there, expand it, and you can actually add stuff into the list. Just double click on the blue selection and type what options you would like to offer to the user. I'm gonna type Cypriot, that's my nationality, and a couple of more in here. English, Spanish. I think 3 is enough. You can add your own nationality or other options as you like. So now if I run the application, I'll be able to see these options being offered to me now. And I can no longer type inside. As you can see, I have to make sure that these are the ones that are offered, and the user cannot go and add something else. So we can clear the other options in here, but we haven't done the clear part for the nationality. So I'm gonna go first into the clear method. Clear all fields is triggered by default, and you can set up the nationality combo box with selected index. If you set up the selected index to 0, this will obviously show you the first choice inside the combo box nationality. The first choice I have written down was the Cypriot, so it will obviously select the Cypriot choice by default, as you can see. If you want, when you clear the form, if you want to select none of these options rather than the first one, you can go in here and type -1, which is none of them are selected. The combo box works like an array, so the 0 value indicates the first selection, 1 indicates the second, 2 indicates the third, and so forth. It goes with that logic. So if you go and type -1 here, since none of those choices are referring to that number, nothing will be selected inside, and in order to select it, you have to expand it. Now you can select one of the choices. You can select this or the other whatsoever, and when you clear it, it now clears that option as well. So I will go at the background of the code once again, and just in here, just under this statement, I'm gonna create a message box again, a message box for nationality, and show the nationality. Let me just put the comment here, and that should be ComboBox. And I'm gonna add the nationality of the user. And that should be this ComboBox.nationality.selected item dot to string. Make sure to convert it to string, even though this is like not 100% required in all cases. It is a nice idea to convert it to string. So whatever item is selected now converted to string, and it will be displayed inside the message box. So let's run this thing. I'm gonna select my sex as male and my hobbies as music and fashion, and I'm gonna select Cypriot as my nationality. So I'm submitting it. I define my sex as male, my interest as fashion and music, maybe we should put a title here, and nationality as Cypriot. So all is done. The final thing I like to show you before I end video is how you can use errorprovider to validate all of this. So go into the toolbox once again and find the errorprovider. It's in there. Drag and drop it to the form and make sure to name it. I'm just gonna call it errorprovider. So once this is done, we're gonna use the errorprovider to focus on a specific form component when the validation is not viable to us. So I'm just gonna go into the submit, go down somewhere and create a custom function, just as I did with the clear all fields one. Just gonna go in here, private void validation, and open close brackets. Now for validation, I'm actually gonna name this as a balloon value because it's much easier for me to so let's call it bool. Much easier for me to basically validate the fields that way. And I'm gonna create a value is validated, which is true by default, and I'm gonna return that. Return the is validated part. So if validation is done successfully, none of these things will be, all of these things will run inside the button submit, and if it's not done, then it will not display it. So let's try this logic. If validation equals to false, which means no validation is done, so validation is not appropriate for us, then I'm gonna say something like return. You can put an else and take everything inside the bracket. It's up to you how you want to handle this. So in here I'm just going to focus on doing the validation. First thing I like to validate is the radio button. So I'm going to write a control structure here. So if this radio button mail dot checked is false, at the same time, which I'm gonna use an and, radio button female dot checked is also false, which means the user did not select any of these choices, then I'm gonna create curly brackets here, select the is validated part to false, now it's not validated, and also set the error provider here. Set error. The first one accepts the control statement, which is we can put either male or female depending on which one you want to use. I'm gonna use the female one, so it should be the female radio, and the message you want to display. Please select your sex by birth. So I'm gonna try to submit this thing. Now the application does not trigger the message boxes, and instead it says please select your sex by birth. And when I select it, it can now display all those message boxes. However, you must realize too that this one does not remove it, so you will have to remove it manually. So make sure to go there and remove this. It's also a nicer idea to run this application with the else part in here. So I'm gonna put this entire thing into the else statement. And this one as well. Just align them. It will be much easier for us to basically follow the logic here. And for the error provider, I'm just gonna come in here and clear it. Error provider, this error provider dot clear. So whenever the form is loaded or the application is resubmitted, I'll make sure that these things are all clear. So let's try to run this application once again, and I'm selected mail. It shows the information. Oops, there's an error here. We didn't type the empty part for it because it's not selected. So I'm gonna say something like if this ComboBox.nationality.text is not empty. Yeah. That will make sure to get rid of this nasty error here, because obviously I haven't done any selection, so it just doesn't understand what to display. You can use text or you can use selected item, it's up to you. Let me just try it again. So when I submit this, it says now select one of them, and I selected one of them and it shows male. Now I'm gonna select music and fashion and Cypriot, and I define my sex as male, fashion and music as my hobbies or interests, and nationality as Cypriot. So clear it, submit it again, and now it doesn't display it. It shows the error message. We can do the same thing for a nationality, but we shouldn't really do it for interest because that's an optional thing. You should usually never use an error provider for checkboxes, because these are completely optional to the user. But you can use it for nationality, it's up to you. So I'm gonna come in here for the validated part and use exactly the same logic. If this, obviously, so gonna use exactly the same logic that I have written up above, ComboBox nationality.text. Basically that is a validation that I needed to do in here, so I'm gonna use it in there. So if this ComboBox nationality.text is to string, we can change it to string, less than or equals to 0 or equals to empty. It's all up to you how to evaluate this. I usually this should be length. It's all up to you how you want to evaluate it. So I'm just gonna use the oops, let's just use the text one, because this is bugging me a bit, so I'm just gonna use the text one instead of looking up the length. So if it is working, why try to change it, huh? So I'm gonna put this to string, and if it is empty, just as I did before. You can use the length as well, it's up to you. You just need to go and fix that error, and I just don't want to do it now. So I'm gonna use this to string equals to empty, and I will basically use the error provider. Error provider dot set error, set it to the combo box, and type the message you want to display. Please select your nationality. The same logic should follow up in here as well, because you obviously done this. Now you must set the is validated value to false, because that will also trigger an error provider. It's also a nice thing if you put an else if here, because you're gonna evaluate each error one by one. So make sure to put else if to evaluate each and every one of these values one by one. So let's try to run this thing. I will go ahead and select male and clear on the submit, click on the submit button, and it says please select your nationality. If I click on this one, I can see now the results. I mean, you can go ahead and change the text in here to the length part, just as we did in here, because every single one of them can be evaluated with the length as well. I think I just have to put length here without the brackets, like that, and it should be a number. So it does the same thing. Remember that the errors will be evaluated one by one. So I'm just gonna click on mail here, and then I will not click in here, and I will select Cypriot, and now it does the same thing, as you can see. So in this video we have used three important form components: radio buttons, which you offer 2-3 options to the user, and you expect them to select one of them. The second component was the checkbox. We offer as many checkboxes as we like to the user. They can select none of them, all of them, a couple of them, or one of them. It's up to them. This is an optional selection, so usually we don't validate this field. And the last one is the combo box, where you offer multiple options, but you can only select one of them. And it is the same as the radio button in terms of how it should work in theory, but usually combo box includes a list of options, so many options in here, and the user expands it to see all of them and selects one of them. Once you have done that, you can display each and every one of these options as you like. Well, I hope this video was useful to you. In the next video we're gonna look into multiple forms, so we're gonna transfer values from one form to the other. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.